TE Talks with Guides is a weekly podcast for lovers of history, travel, and all things Italian. You have painted a magnificent picture here for me and for everyone listening. That's really fantastic, Guia, because this idea, first of all, we have now where the palace was established, that Napoleon's mother lived across the street, and that he is buying this artwork and that he places it in this palace. And I would love to be able to see photographs. I have to go search now if there are any images left of the palace. And I believe that there are images, because we always love to have the Zoom conference shown up on YouTube after our destination videos go through. And so we're going to be inserting these images to help tell us the story. What really astounds me, and I didn't think about this before, but I don't think I've ever heard about an artist being presumptive enough to say to the patron who paid for it, saying, no, this is where this needs to be. I'm very upset by this. I mean, we know that Michelangelo was difficult to deal with, but I don't ever...
Probably even Canova was not an easy guy.
Well, they never are.
We are speaking of people that had devoted their whole life to their art. So they couldn't be neglected in any possible way. They didn't like to be neglected, and they defended their works of art as they were their own creatures. And this is right exactly what happened with Hercules and Lyca, which is right exactly a masterpiece. Is a giant marble group, is based on a myth, part of the myth of Hercules. Hercules, during, size of madness, is throwing Lyca, which is a poor boy, in the sea, keeping it from his ankle. So basically, the statue describes the very powerful body of Hercules in the maximum point of his effort in order to throw Lyca, which is a young boy, so his body is much slender, but the two bodies basically form a sort of circle. So it's an incredible piece of art, really an incredible piece of art.
Yes.
And I guess that it was a blessing in disguise that the original patron didn't buy this statue, because probably the comparison the position originally thought for Hercules in Lyca wouldn't make justice to this masterpiece.
Wonderful. You also mentioned about how he's very specific about light, and that I think is wonderful too, because we don't ever hear of that, but it must have been so important for so many artists, including Caravaggio, Raphael, Michelangelo. Michelangelo did comment about the light. I remember inside the architecture of St. Peter's and how he was critical of San Gallo the Younger because it was not light enough. But that light was so very important. I remember other stories of Canova with the Paolina Borghese, how he would like to show people the statue by candlelight. And I also remember from your virtual tour, and I never knew, because his Perseus statue inside the Vatican museums, he would place a candle inside the head of Medusa. These effects are so incredible. I mean, they're just must have been astounding.
Yes, probably. We tend to neglect this aspect because now we can relate on incredible spotlights. So light is no longer a problem to us. But try to imagine when you didn't have electrical power.
Yes.
You could basically put these masterpieces in the shade and losing in this way the most of the theatrical effect that was planned. Consider, for instance, an artist by Bernini. There is a church in Rome, the church of Santa Maria della Vittoria, in which Bernini basically opened a window on the top of one of his masterpieces just in order to provide the right quality of light. So light is a very important thing in something that is three-dimensional, because basically it is the thing that enhances this kind of 3D view.
Yeah, it would be wonderful if one could be able to see some of these things. I mean, they could never do the head of the Medusa with a candle because it would damage the statue.
Yes.
Unfortunately, but if they could ever, like, even chapels, sometimes you can see things like that. I even heard, and it could be wrong, that Villa Albani itself did not have electric light in it, that they still, I mean, I don't know if that's true or not anymore, but I found that just an interesting kind of bizarre story. Now, you've established also, you said for a wealthy family, and really 35 million scudi, there would be, we have to have this in mind, a level of billionaires.
Yes, I would call them tycoons.
Yeah, exactly, tycoons. they to be gentrified, to be accepted into society. So they bought the lands outside where they have the Circus of Maxentius, the Villa Quintili, so they're finding wonderful statues. That's
archaeological excavation,
yeah.
art collection that was put together basically buying former collections from late artists or from families that had temporary problems. And the suburban villa was bought from the Torlonia family, from the Colonna family, and was arranged for the first time by Giovanni, that hired the same artists and architects, the sort of dream team that had worked for the Borghese family, and later was renewed by his son Alessandro, because the man that actually marked the top of the social rising of the Torlonia was Alessandro, that was born in 1800. So he was a man of the new century. And he was the man that was educated in the best places in Europe. Basically, he made a sort of grand tour on the opposite side. He was born and raised in Rome, but he traveled to Paris and to London in order to complete his education. And when he came back to Rome, he was a man that knew art, had an artistic sensibility opposite to his father, that probably was more focused on the economic side and on marking that they were becoming part of the nobility. But Alessandro had a great sense of art. He was the patron of several artists. And of course, he could rely on an incredible amount of money. So the renewal started by Alessandro were incredible, both for the palace in Venice Square and for the Villa Torlonia. The Villa Torlonia was completely renewed according to two models. The first one was a classical model, that to say Hadrian's Villa in Tivoli. Hadrian's Villa, as you know, is a sort of ensemble of several pavilions that can provide you with memories of the journey that probably the Emperor Hadrian had throughout the empire. And the Torlonias put up several pavilions in the park of the villa just in order to provide this kind of emotion, thing that had already been made a few years before by the Borghese family in the Borghese Park. So these two models, Hadrian's Villa and the Park of Villa Borghese, were the two models used by Alessandro in order to mark, that he was the man of the cycle of this century. And actually was, because beside his, artistic sensibility, he was an incredible businessman. He went on, making money for the family. And he was a man that was able to accomplish some feats that hadn't been seen in Rome since the time of the Roman Empire. He was very keen on engineering. And of course, he wanted exotic memories in the park. So why don't we put up a couple of obelisks? There were no longer obelisks, ancient obelisks from Egypt or from the Roman Empire available in Rome. So Alessandro had two brand new obelisks carved in the north of Italy. The granite that were used came from the Alps, so from the mountain not far from Milan. From Milan, they shipped this obelisk to the Adriatic Sea using the Po River, and then they made the circumnavigation of the Italian peninsula in order to arrive to Fiumicino. There, the obelisks were loaded on barges that were pulled upstream along the Tiber River, and finally, they were delivered in Villa Torlonia. This was the kind of mood. This kind of delivering had been made last time by Roman emperors. The raising of the obelisk in front of Villa Torlonia, that of course represented the inauguration of the new Villa Torlonia, was a social event. The Pope took part to this event. The King of Baviera, Ludwig, took part to this event. More than 16,000 ciambelle, which are, a kind of local bread, was delivered to the people that were allowed to enter and to see the beauty of this obelisk. And the other amazing thing is that the carvings that you see on this obelisk are real dedication to Alessandro's parents. So he was a guy that was actually able of an engineering that was incredible for the time. Another thing that he made, and he became Principe del Fucino, so he became prince in this way was to drain a lake in the central part of Italy, the area of the Fucino in Abruzzo, not far from the place where Thomas leaves Katie. So he had a lake drain just in order to turn this area into an incredible fertile area that could be cultivated with potatoes. And, you know, this made him even richer because we are speaking of 17,000 hectares of new land that could be cultivated, making basically much richer the owner of this place. So Alessandro was actually an incredible guy, extremely rich. He was the man that started an incredible, clever policy in marriages, because you have to recall that they were newcomers. So probably the other families of Rome didn't look at them in a very good way. Of course, they needed them because they had money, but sometimes they put their hands on things, artistic jewels, properties, fiefdoms that had been part of this noble family's estate for ages. So we can imagine that the attitude toward the Torlonia family was not very good. So the only way to solve the problem was through marriages. Alessandro got married with a member of the Colonna family. And their only daughter, Anna Maria, got married with a member of the Borghese family, receiving a special dispensation so that the Prince Borghese could bear both last names, Borghese and Torlonia, allowing to both families to go on in their family trees. So within a couple of generations, those people that had arrived to Rome in order to be businessmen were part, to all intent and purpose, of the most important families of the Roman nobility. So Alessandro, in some way, marked the rising, the top part of the social rising of the Torlonias, and he marked them also in an artistic way. He was a great artistic patron. He was very fond of music, so he sponsored the renewal of several theaters in Rome, including Teatro Argentina, that is still working as a theater. He was a man that basically bought Villa Albani. He was the one that put Villa Albani within the Torlonia's estate. And he paid for it 700,000 scudi. So we are always speaking of an incredible amount of money paid for putting his hands not only on this jewel, because it's an architectural jewel. Consider that, you know, Carlo Marchioni was the architect and Giovan Battista Nolli planned the garden. Giovan Battista Nolli was the man that provided us with an incredible map of Rome in 1700. So we are speaking of very important names, but also for the art collection that was inside. The art collection that partially had been arranged by Wilkenman, had been restored by Cavacetti. We are speaking of Greek and Roman statues and reliefs that were among the most important in the Rome in that time. So buying Villa Albani was a statement. We are, to all intent and purpose, not only very wealthy, but we are part of the Roman nobility. And a few years later, when Rome had just become, the capital of the Italian kingdom, you know, that on 1861, on 1871, Rome became the capital of the Italian kingdom. A few years later, Alessandro Torlonia was the man that moved to a new property in Trastevere, a great deal of these sculptures, inaugurating the first private museum of classical art in Rome, the Torlonia Museum, that was located in a building that was formerly used by the Corsini family as a whole factory. All this room were exploited by the Torlonia family in order to create this private museum, which was, and this is something that I'm quoting the description made in the guidebook, this museum was created thanks to the generosity of the Prince Torlonia, with a specific goal to compete with the Vatican and the Capitoline Museum, the two most important institutions in terms of art that had been inaugurated in Rome in 1700. So this museum was for sure a great, sort of breaking news in the artistic environment of late 1800. We have pictures of the time of couples that are visiting this museum, a museum that could display 620 different sculptures displayed in 77 rooms. So it was not just a small thing, it was actually a marking point. And Giovanni Alessandro, anyway, never forgot that he was most of all a businessman. So he promoted all these feats, the engineering, the renewal of the palace in Venice Square, the renewal of the villa, the raising of the obelisk, the inauguration of the museum, through publishing books that were incredible books, using the cutting edge technologies of the time for enhancing the importance of what he had made. For instance, the guidebook of the catalog is the better word, the catalog of the Museum Torlonia that was published a little bit later, was illustrated through phototipie. Phototipie can be considered the ancestor of the modern picture. So for the first time, we had real photos that illustrated the collection of the Torlonia, and the text was written by a member of the Visconti family. The Visconti family has been the most important antiquarian family in Rome since the time of the inauguration of the Pio Clementine Museum. If you follow my virtual tour, I will speak about Giovan Battista and Daniel Quirino. The last members of this family were involved in the creation and in the description of the Torlonia Museum. This just to make you realize how important this stuff was at the beginning of 1800. And why, and this probably also makes you realize why the temporary exhibition that is currently on display in Rome about the Torlonia marble is so important.
Yes, now let's get to this. Now, first of all, I'm completely enthralled. Take this to a whole new level for me. The idea with the obelisks, and you put this into a context, but that's what makes you such a great guide. That's what guides do in general. But what I love about you is the way that you are prepared. The preparation that you have, to me, is astounding. And I so appreciate that. I wanted to say that. It was beautiful. The story of the ciambelloni being served, or Mamma Mia, I'm getting hungry now. And that the Pope and a king arrives to see this obelisk, and it's just this recalling of the ancient world, or having that transported with this feats of engineer, the generosity that they have, so that they're opening up these museums to be put on display to compete with Rome itself, with the Comune di Roma, let's say,
yes,
also with the Pope. So what happened? What happened? Why did there this falling?
Despite, the good purpose of competing, this competition went wrong for the Torlonians. I mean, it was possible to visit the museum up to, let's say, World War II. It was, you had to get a special permission and you were allowed to visit the Torlonia Museum in Trastevere. After World War II, it became more and more difficult to visit this museum. In the meantime, some members of the Torlonia family thought that they could exploit that building in a better way, turning this incredible number of rooms into a sort of luxury small apartment. This happened around the 70s. It was absolutely illegal. So Don Alessandro, which was an homonymous of the Alessandro we were speaking before, was sued and went under a trial for this reason. And the whole collection of the Torlonia marbles was put under seizure by the Italian state. So basically this happened around the 70s. Nobody in Rome has seen the statues ever seen.
Oh my God.
What is happening now? Next generation. The acknowledgement that anyway, the Torlonia collection is one of the most important private collection of classical art in the world. The threat that, they could sell part of this stuff, or they start to treat with foreign states, including the United States, brought the Italian institution to a kind of new agreement with the new members of the Torlonia family, with the youngest members of the Torlonia family, that in the meantime had turned the artistic collection and Villa Albani into a foundation. So there was an agreement between the Italian Ministry of Cultural Heritage and the Torlonia Foundation for making it possible to display these marbles once more to the public. probably in a new place so that, the prince could make the most of the building in the area of Trastevere. So just in order to make things starting to work, they made an agreement for a temporary exhibition of a small portion of the sculptures. I mentioned that they were 620. Now we have 90 of them on exhibition in a temporary exhibition that is incredible for many reasons. First of all, because nobody has seen this sculpture for almost 50 years. Second point, thanks to the sponsorship of the Bulgari family, it was possible to restore the sculpture. So the sculpture that you are seeing in this temporary exhibition have been brought back to their best appearance, marking a sort of story of art collecting, but also story of restoration work in Rome since the Renaissance to our time. It's incredible, this exhibition for the place, because the statues are currently displayed in Villa Caffarelli, that actually is a Renaissance villa that was built in what used to be the cella, that to say the central part of the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximum. That to say that the most important collection of sculpture of the Greek and Roman time are currently displayed in what used to be the center of the pagan religion of the Roman Empire is an incredible place. The beauty of the statues speak for themselves. And visiting this sculpture, you have the incredible chance to go backward in time, passing through the most important art collections from the Renaissance period to late 1800, because the exhibition is divided in 5 sections. So you can see something that was displayed in the museum. The first room is emotional because you have right in front of you a full series of Roman emperors. So from Augustus to Constantine, the full story of the Roman Empire is displayed right in front of you. And on the opposite side of the room, you have the only sculpture in bronze. And following my tour, probably you should know why bronze sculpture were so important in the art collection of the past. And then you pass through the archaeological excavation undertaken by the Torlonias, and in that room you have several pieces, among whom we have an incredible Greek relief that was found in the property of Roma Vecchia. But knowing the story of this place, we can state that this Greek relief that dates back to the 5th century before Christ, the period of Phidia, the period of classical art, was already part of an art collection that belonged to Erode Attico, which was a Roman nobleman of the 2nd century after Christ. So when Rome was in the peak of the empire, someone had already this relief in his own collection. And then you go backward, Villa Albani, the collection Cavacepi, the Giustiniani collection. At some point, Giovanni Torlonia bought the collection of the Giustiniani family because they were no longer able to pay back the money they had got from the Bank Torlonia. And, the Giustiniani collection was the top collection in 1600 Rome. Marchese Vincenzo Giustiniani had been one of the most important Caravaggio's patrons, and he was a man that had put together an incredible collection of ancient sculptures, buying at least a couple of specimens for each kind of status. So probably he was the first man that realized that the Roman artist had made copies of previous original made by the Greeks. But when you visit the gallery of the Giustiniani collection, you have the same status on both sides. And, the Torlonians were able to buy the Giustiniani collection, and also some pieces that were part of the art collection of the Renaissance cardinals. Most of this incredible statues had been restored by the most incredible artists ever. Wandering in the rooms of the temporary exhibition, we will hear the echoes of names such as Raphael, that of course didn't put his hands directly on the statues, but some of the statues were restored according to a drawing made by Raphael, or the names of the Bernini's family. Can you imagine? The family involved in the building of the main altar of St. Peter and of several other masterpieces all around Rome was also involved in the restoration of the billy goat that belonged to the Giustiniani
I love
family.
that piece. So it seems like you can totally see it's bringing his hand on it. I believe also Algardi, was he mentioned as well?
Yes, Algardi. We have Duques Noir that work for the Giustiniani family. So visiting the Torlonia marble temporary exhibition, just a journey through art collecting in Rome from Renaissance onward.
Yes.
And there are such beautiful statues. I can quote a lot of them. I just pick up one for you because it's one of the most important pieces of the collection. Is called the Estia Giustiniani, because it was to be part of the Giustiniani collection. And it is a representation of the goddess Hestia for the Greek, Vesta for the Romans, which was the goddess of the hearth, celebrated even in the Roman Forum. You know that in the Roman Forum we had a small shrine dedicated to the goddess Vesta, where the sacred flame of Rome was tended by 6 Vestal virgins, so 6 girls that devoted their lives to this goddess. And we have the representation, the physical representation of this goddess, a little bit bigger than the natural size, as a point of attraction of this marble collection. And of course, the route brings you to the core of the Capitoline Museum, where you can see the donation of Pope Sixtus I. So it's just a sample of the whole collection, but is very well organized, and it allows you to be visited as a sort of a series of Chinese boxes back to the art, to the heart of the Roman art displayed in the Capitoline Museum.
Wow, this is magnificent. Now, because you've helped to highlight the reasons as to why every official tour guide of Rome was getting in line and elbowing each other to get in to see this exhibit, because we did know about the collection, we studied it, but we were not able to see it until now for the first time. I don't remember, when is it supposed to be ending, the collection exhibit?
Actually, according to the original plan, it was supposed to be on June, but they are speaking about postponing this term, considering that they have been closed for months due to the pandemic emergency. So probably in the next future, they will announce that the exhibition last day will be put off for this reason. Then probably the sculpture are going to have a tour all around the world, Paris and United States. And finally, they will be located in a final seat. We don't know where it will be, because we have some ideas for now, but the last decision hasn't made yet. So we are still waiting which will be the final place. But the final idea is to have a permanent exhibition of the sculptures, as well as of the other that in the meantime will be restored, probably close to one of the most important monuments of Rome, which is the Colosseum. This is the idea by now. Then I don't know. But anyway, there are, as I was telling you before, new relation between the Torlonia Foundation and the Italian institution. So I guess that they will make good. I hope that they will make good use of this new kind of relationship.
Well, yes. Thank you, Guia. I mean, this is just outstanding. For me, I have learned so much today, and I don't know how if people realize, what this opportunity is to be a part, to be able to listen to these conversations. But I mean, it's really wonderful work that you've done. I understand that you did a lot of preparation for this. And I'm just so enthused about it. I'm infectious. I want to learn more and more and more.
Just one last thing, because this is a thing that very few people knows, but it's nice to know. There is a place in the park of Villa Torlonia that is related with the United States. In which way? In the park of Villa Torlonia, among the several pavilions, we have a theater that was decorated in the middle of 1800 by a Roman painter, Costantino Brumidi. Costantino Brumidi was not only a painter, he was also a patriot. So he fought against the Pope during the Roman Republic in 1849. When the Pope came back, he had to flee Rome and he went to the United States, keeping his work as a painter. So Costantino Brumidi is the painter who had decorated the beautiful interior part of the dome of Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., with the apotheosis of George Washington. There is this little fil rouge that links Capitol Hill with the theater of Villa Torlonia.
Oh, thank you so much for that. What I always love about Rome, and you've underlined it as well here today, because I never realized that the connection between Villa Adriana and Villa Torlonia and Villa Borghese and these various spaces, which puts things into such a wonderful context for me. And that we will be doing a destinations video, of course, about Villa Adriana and Villa d'Este. But I mean, it's just completely wondrous in these spaces and with these pavilions. And we didn't even get to, but we're a little cut short on time, the House of the Owls, which I think...
Yes, the House of the Owls is a masterpiece because now it's part of the museum, and it is a museum dedicated to the stained glass window of the Liberty period. It's a small fairy tale place conceived for one of the weirdest members of the family that spent there the last part of his life, but it is decorated with incredible stained glass windows realized by an incredible craftsman. His name was Cesare Picchiarini, also known as Mastro Picchio, that used the drawings provided by the best Liberty artists, Duilio Cambellotti, Paolo Paschetto, Umberto Bottatti, for his beautiful windows. The name, the little holes, are in one of these stained glass windows, but what that literally left me speechless when I visited this part, because it tells a lot about the craftsmanship of Mastro Picchio, was a small frame with several glass circle, normal glass circle, one beside the other. We have, I guess, 15 of them or something like this. And when I read the tag beneath them, I realized that every year Mastro Picchio made a cutting from a glass slab of a glass circle freehand in front of his pupils, just to show them that his hand was still steady.
Wow.
It's not a masterpiece because we are looking at a circle of glass this large, but try to imagine how he could do this.
Yes, of course. To be able to do a perfect circle is like Giotto's. Oh,
yes, like Giotto, but Giotto put it on the paper, try to cut it from the glass slab.
It's even harder. Oh gosh, no. I mean, I'm really left out with words to describe how thankful I am to be able to have this conversation with you, Guia. And you are the first person that I've ever done a podcast with. We will put that recording up because we were on the terrace of the Raphael Hotel, and I said,
yes.
And we had a lovely discussion about Bernini
and Borromini, the artistic competition of 1600 Rome.
Yes, in fact, and we will also be talking later on about the Quirinal Hill. And
yes, because I had the privilege to serve at the Quirinal as a guide for 6 months. Yes. So it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life, because, the Quirinal is now one of the most important Italian institutional building. It's the seat of the President of the Italian Republic. So being allowed to lead people there was one of the privileges of my job.
Yes, I think you have a very particular gift with your enthusiasm and your clarity and your background information that points out that it's not just the contribution to artistic history of the super famous Titian, Raphael, Michelangelo, but there's so much more with these other artists that you...
Yes, yes, absolutely. Wonderful. And what is important to me is to bring back to light the contest. I guess that art history was made of course, by artists, but is a result of an interaction between historical context, people, patrons, normal people. And so you have to mix everything together in order to understand why an artist arrived to this outcome. This is, in my opinion, a very challenging but a very fascinating way of studying art history.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have so many more ideas of so many more podcasts where you and I are going to be talking. If you want to do it, if you'll come back when I invite you back. But anyways,
I'll be glad to do that.
So Guia, at this point in our podcast, I always like to ask everybody, the guides, their travel tips. You know, you have a lot of experience of traveling yourself. In fact, you didn't even mention the fact that you lived in China for a good few years.
Yes, I've been there for 3 years in the past.
Yes, that's right. That's another thing that we could talk about.
And I had the privilege to deliver a lecture about Roman Baroque art in front of the people of the National Chinese Museum. It was great. Speaking of Bernini and Borromini in front of a group, 1,000 of Chinese people that were listening to me. It's very emotional.
I kept on thinking about that while you were giving your presentation, because I felt like, you know, there was this, you know, you have this experience, your knowledge is so in depth about Western civilization with Italian civilization, but then you've also had the experience and a point of view to observe Eastern culture as well by living in China. So that's great. But getting back to that, let's say, what would you recommend as a travel tip for people coming to Italy or to Rome?
Okay, of course, I have a lot of normal tips, like, you know, choose the period, book in advance, avoid the public means of transportation if they are too crowded. But I wanted to be focused on something that you wrote on your website when I started to work for Through Eternity. I recall this sentence that sounded like, most of times visit Rome is the fulfillment of a dream. I never forgot that, you know, quote. And so I would urge you to make a gift to yourself. I know that is a little bit expensive, but you are coming out from a terrible period. Pandemic, you know, was very painful for each of us. So when finally everything will be over and you will be back to come to Rome, make a gift to yourself. Book just one night, an aperitivo, or why not a dinner in one of the rooftop gardens of the several hotels in Rome, enjoying the city from the top. Robert was mentioning our first podcast before. It was an incredible experience because it was made in a very specific place. We were on the rooftop garden of the Raphael Hotel, and we have Piazza Navona right in front of us. So create a moment for yourself like this. I know that is a little bit expensive, but you know, Rome is once in your life, or maybe twice. And I think that you won't regret the expenses, because the kind of experience that you can get is something emotional and unforgettable.
I totally agree with you. And people can reach out back to us and we'll tell them what are the best places to go, because there are probably...
Yes, because there are several of them. So according to your personal taste, you can choose the Baroque Rome, the Renaissance Rome, the Ancient Roman Forum. You have a lot of locations. Of course, Office can help you in making this experience a very special experience, because it has to be.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And we'll hope to hear from you guys soon. We have an episode coming out every week, every Wednesday. Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you for listening to our TE Talks with Guides. We have a new episode every Wednesday. Please subscribe to get an alert when each podcast comes out. Rate us and tell people how you enjoyed it, and share it on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Most importantly, if you enjoyed it, send us a feedback about the show. Also, if you are curious about what some of these people and places we talked about look like, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch the video on this podcast, where we have inserted special images for you to further enjoy the story.